Governor Doug Ducey on trade, border security, and education funding.
It's critical to our economy, and it would devastate Mexico's economy.
Divided opinions over one school district's plan to update its sex ed curriculum.
It is about family values.
We're exposing them potentially to really understand themselves better.
Plus, the importance of a free press from acclaimed journalist Christiane Amanpour.
People will be worse off if our profession is killed off.
Hello and welcome to Arizona 360. I'm Lorraine Rivera. Thank you for joining us. An impeachment inquiry into President Trump dominated news on Capitol Hill this week. But in Arizona, Governor Doug Ducey says he doesn't want Congress to lose sight of ratifying the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement that would replace NAFTA. It's one of many issues we covered during an interview here at Arizona Public Media. We began our conversation with his attempts to keep the focus on the new trade deal.
Well, hopefully the viewers will help me pressure Arizona lawmakers. I've called out Senator Sinema with gratitude and Senator McSally with thanks, along with 4 of our 9 congresspeople who say that they are a yes on it. We put together a website, USMCAnow.org. Citizens can go to that website and use some positive peer pressure to get our legislators to say, let's get this on the floor, let's vote on this. If it does go on the floor, it will pass, and it's very important for Arizona. Everyone knows Mexico's our #1 trading partner times 4. Canada is also a valued partner, and there's 44 other governors that could be sitting in this chair that have a top 2 trading relationship with Mexico or Canada. So it's critical for the United States economy.
Some Democrats have voiced concerns about things like labor, environment standards. How closely are you watching those things to be sure that if it goes through, they're honored?
This has already been ratified by Mexico. This has been negotiated by the trade ambassadors. Let's not make perfect the enemy of very good, and a dramatic improvement over what NAFTA was. NAFTA was written 23 years ago. I call it a rotary phone agreement. This is an agreement that takes into account the cyber age, the digital age, the internet, and all the other things that we're enjoying. It's good for the United States. It's great for Arizona. It's very good for Mexico and for Mexico's labor. You can always find one issue so that you will be a no. This is a dramatic improvement on the agreement that we have today. And like I said, it's critical to our economy, and it would devastate Mexico's economy to not have this trade agreement.
Let's switch gears and talk about border security. As you know, there's construction occurring in Douglas, San Luis, Oregon Pipe. The numbers, though, for apprehensions and families seeking asylum has dropped. Is there still a need for this border construction?
Well, the numbers have dropped, but they're still large numbers. I mean, when you go from 100,000 people a month to tens of thousands of people a month, that's a dramatic drop, but we still have an issue. And when I talk about apprehensions and border security, I want to focus on the drug cartels, human trafficking, and child sex trafficking. So I do think there are parts of our border where a wall is necessary, where a physical barrier is necessary. There's other parts where we just need more boots on the ground or technology, the use of drones or satellites. But I think we should find a way that people use the proper ports of entry to enter the country, that we have the robust trade that we so enjoy, but we need to clamp down on these dangerous drugs that are coming across the border. We hear about it in a spike in methamphetamine and fentanyl and cocaine. These are important issues.
Sanctuary City, I know that you have spoken about less government is better, but you're taking a stance on this issue here in the Tucson area.
Well, my position is one that's informed by Mayor Rothschild, the Tucson City Council. I think all 3 Democrat candidates for mayor were all opposed to this idea because it could cost the city of Tucson north of $100 million. It could also hurt public safety.
You've also recognized this is a humanitarian issue, so where's the balance in all this?
Well, I think we're always going to have a humanitarian stance in Arizona, and I really want to applaud our nonprofits, our NGOs, our faith-based community, and our churches that stood so tall while we were having the humanitarian crisis at the border. That still remains. It may be lessened, it may not be in the nightly news or the national news every night, but we still have people coming across the border, some from a security standpoint and many from a humanitarian standpoint. And we want to make sure that we always have that balance in our public policy in Arizona and in the United States.
Let's move to education. Your 20 by 2020 plan is in full swing. As we know, the Board of Regents is really touting the Teachers Academy. Still, though, there are some qualified teachers missing from in front of the classrooms. How are you measuring success thus far?
Well, we need to do more. I want to say that the 20 by 2020 plan for our hardworking Arizona teachers is nearly complete. It was 10% pay increase last year, 5% this year, and 5% next year. We've been able to do all that without raising taxes. We've closed the gap in terms of where our vacancies are. There's more left to do. We have the Arizona Teachers Academy, so it says to a young person like all the wonderful young people here at U of A, if they choose education as a profession, if they serve for 5 years, they'll graduate debt-free and there will be a job waiting for them. And then we're also working with accreditation. People that are older, that have experience and skills and can bring something to the front of the classroom that they can get in front and ply their trade without having to go back to school. And we leave that decision to the principal and the superintendents.
What happens after 2020?
Well, like I said, we're never going to check the box on K-12 education. I'm someone that doesn't want to make spending the measure of success. I want us to measure how are our kids doing in math, reading, and science. Where are they in 4th grade? Where are they in 8th grade? What's our graduation rate? What's our higher attainment rate? Whether that's the U of A, career and technical education, or vocational and military pursuits. That's what we should measure. We're going to have more dollars available. 5 years ago, Lorraine, when you and I first met, our state was in a budget crisis with $1 billion deficit. Our education system was mired in lawsuits, and the economy was sluggish. Today, we sit here with $1 billion balance in the rainy day fund and $1 billion surplus in our general fund. We have options in the state of Arizona. We should make sure that we don't go on a spending spree, but that we're fiscally responsible with targeted investments, that we hold accountability for the return and the benefit of our children and our teachers.
Okay, Governor Ducey, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Tucson's largest school district is in the process of updating its sex education curriculum for the first time since 2006. Changes proposed include teaching beyond abstinence only as the only effective way to prevent pregnancies and STDs. It also takes a more gender-neutral position, removing language that may offend LGBT students. Strong and divisive feedback from the public led the school board to delay a final vote this month. To understand the controversy, we heard from people on both sides of the issue. We begin with Obed Orozco, a pastor and father who spoke out against the proposed changes.
First of all, let me debunk any notions that we are homophobic or we are against any other beliefs or anything like that. We just, our concerns is, like I've said before, is we believe that the school is the second home, but the home is the first school of our children. And that they're taking a little too many liberties to share with our children things that I believe belong in the family first.
You're a pastor, you know that some families are not having these conversations at home. So whose responsibility should it be when the parents aren't talking about it, but the students are curious? Interestingly
enough, one of the items that I heard the board, TUSD board, discussing once they decided to postpone the decision, it was one of those things that they educate the parents. Why don't we educate the parents? Why don't we teach the parents what it is that we are trying to teach their children? And then they can take the lead on education in that area, and then the school can come in behind, and like a school should be, not indoctrination, but education. Educate them on these things.
When you say indoctrination, are you saying like the district introducing homosexuality, for example, to students?
Yeah, we believe in sex education, yes. Teach them how you came to earth, how a boy and a girl. But beyond that, and begin to transgender fluidity and you just be whoever you know, that's something that can come later, and they can decide for themselves once they're minds are fully developed, once their emotions are fully developed. That is the whole thing. We are not against it at all.
Some of this has become religious and political. Early on in the interview, though, you said that it's not. So
It isn't.
what
Not
is
at
it
all.
really about then?
It is not about religious. It is about family values. But we happen to be, the ones that got a whiff of it happen to be mostly pastors. So, and then we begin to include family. Then the families that are not even religious, that don't consider themselves Latinos, begin to say, hey, wait a minute, I don't feel comfortable with this education, our kids being educated this way by the school.
There are probably people watching this who will say, you're traditional, you're out of touch. What do you say to them?
We are not out of touch. We know there are different genders out there, different ways. It is impossible, like we say in Spanish, to tapar el sol con un dedo. So you cannot cover the sun with one finger. It's everywhere. But how it begins in our children, why would you want to indoctrinate? It's just the same thing, you don't let us pray in school, you don't let us teach about Jesus. We understand this because there are so many other things that are being taught that you don't want to teach just one thing, but exactly the same thing. Why would not be teaching about the Bible, but they are able to teach about other things that are not, our kids are not prepared to digest yet.
Those in favor of reforming TUSD's sex ed curriculum include Russell Toomey, a father and professor at the U of A School of Family and Consumer Sciences.
I'm really excited about the proposed curriculum to make the curriculum that's taught in K through 12 classrooms more inclusive of LGBT, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender identities or experiences, as well as to provide medically accurate, comprehensive sex education to all students who deserve knowledge about how to keep their bodies healthy, how to keep relationships healthy, and how to make those decisions around sexuality.
There are families who say these sorts of conversations are better left in the home environment. Is that an argument that you can understand, that you see the value of?
I can definitely see the importance of religious beliefs and beliefs that center sexuality as being a family topic. But I think it's also important as we look at Arizona statistics around risky sexual behavior. We see some alarming statistics that really suggest that perhaps we need to be including this content at school so that every child who's in school has the opportunity to learn about how to keep their bodies safe. And I think it's important to note that this curriculum is actually an opt-in curriculum. So the parents who are choosing or thinking that they do not want their child to receive this curriculum actually don't even have to do anything, and their child will not receive the curriculum.
One of the arguments the opposition has stated is that this is about sexuality, not sex ed. In addition to being a parent, you're also a professor who studies this very issue at the University of Arizona. In your research, exposing children to these concepts, ideas, is that detrimental to their development?
Absolutely not. So we know that children actually pretty strongly and firmly know who they are as children, specific to gender around the ages of 2 to 3. So we're not exposing them to anything new. We're exposing them potentially to really understand themselves better and to give terminology or language to an experience that they may be experiencing. We also know that the curriculum is not going to go and teach inappropriate or age-inappropriate content. It is age-appropriate content. And so the information on, for instance, LGBT identities does not even come up until middle school. And by that point, we know that most children have been exposed to information about LGBT identities.
The opposition has also expressed concern about indoctrination. That's exposing them to things that are perhaps not traditional in some circles. Things like homosexuality. What's your response to that?
Well, I would say it's like any public health campaign. We know that when we provide information about things like alcohol use, when we talk to youth about alcohol use, it does not increase alcohol use. Just like talking about sexuality and sex ed in particular, comprehensive sex ed is not associated with higher rates of teen pregnancy, for example, or more teens engaging in sex. Very similar to homosexuality or gay, lesbian, bisexual, sexual minority identities and experiences. There's no correlation or causation between talking about these identities and children adopting these identities.
As for TUSD's next steps, the board decided to spend the next few months reworking the curriculum before taking a final vote. We got insight into the district's approach from AZPM education reporter Duncan Moon. What does state law require that TUSD actually teach its students about sex ed?
Well, it doesn't require that they teach them anything about sex ed. It is entirely optional. But if they're going to teach sex ed, they must teach that abstinence only is the only foolproof way, 100% way of preventing unwanted pregnancy. So that has to be not only in the curriculum, but it has to be upfront. It has to be the prime thing that you're teaching. Below that, nothing else is mandated. They don't have to talk about it being medically accurate. It doesn't have to be medically accurate. They don't have to talk about contraception or anything like that. So they don't have to do it, but if they do, it has to include abstinence only.
One of the things that has been part of this discussion is that if families don't want to participate or don't want their child enrolled in that class, they don't have to be. Is that true?
That's exactly true. In fact, it's the way it's set up by state law is there was some confusion about this. Parents were saying it's opt-out. I can take my children out. But actually, by state law, if you want your child to take sexual education in the school, you have to opt in. You have to take a piece of paper and sign it, and the letter has to say, I want my child to be in sexual education class in school. So it is entirely an opt-in program.
I know you have attended many of these forums held throughout the semester thus far. What are you gleaning from the pro and the con sides in this argument?
Well, I think it's a very gray issue, and it cuts deeply into culture. I think especially with a large Hispanic culture in TUSD, many people, one after another at these public hearings would say, this conflicts with my culture. I find this offensive. We teach our children what we need to teach them, and through what our culture teaches us. And that's hard to argue against. On the other hand, you have those who are saying, well, a lot has changed. Kids have YouTube now. They're seeing all sorts of things that they could never see before. And so we need to get them good information, medically accurate, whether we call it evidence-based information, so that they know these things because they have access to it now. Let's make sure that the information that they have is good so they can make the best choices that they can. So there are strong arguments on both sides that come from different places.
Okay, Duncan, we look forward to your reporting. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
In a country where free press is defined as a civil liberty, it may surprise some that on the World Press Freedom Index, the United States doesn't crack the top 10 or even come close. Among nearly 180 countries, the U.S. ranks 48th. For its annual list, Reporters Without Borders surveys journalists around the globe to determine the level of freedom and safety they experience on the job. The United States' latest score is categorized as problematic. As for the challenges and changes facing the industry, we got insight from world-renowned journalist Christiane Amanpour. Christopher Conover has more.
Hello everyone, and welcome to Amanpour & Company.
With a career spanning nearly 4 decades, Christiane Amanpour has reported from war zones, questioned world leaders, and earned countless accolades for her work, including the Zanger Award for Press Freedom. Amanpour accepted that award from the University of Arizona School of Journalism this month.
Because press freedom today takes on extraordinary significance and extraordinary meaning.
The Zanger Award honors journalists who fight for the people's right to know, a battle made more complicated as critics, including the president, continue to decry the media as fake news.
I don't know who gave you that. That's more fake news. There's a lot of fake news out there.
The president is fond of saying fake news. It's become a mantra amongst the president, a lot of supporters and other people. The trust of the media seems to have eroded as a result. What can we as members of the media do to get that trust back?
Well, I think we just have to do our job faultlessly. We have to be even more careful that we don't get things wrong. If we do get things wrong, that we immediately fess up, apologize, correct. However, I also don't think we ought to bend over backwards to accept this fake news moniker. Look, there's been fake news since time immemorial. There's been propaganda, there's been, all sorts of leaders trying to twist facts in the way that's most beneficial to them. Fake news means two things, either outright lies, or it's when people like us tell stories, hold officials accountable, report facts that they don't like, so they just try to duck under it by saying fake news. But I think we have to be aware that this constant attack on our credibility does have a corrosive effect and has a cumulative effect. So we really do have to stand up for our rights, keep doing good journalism, and make people understand that they need us. They can't exist in a world where there aren't journalists who are dedicated to bringing them, free, fair, and independent facts and information. And I always say, the difference between truth and lies is the difference between freedom and dictatorship. And people will be worse off if our profession is killed off. So we just need to be very clear and fight hard for our rights.
You are fond of saying, when it comes to defining how you approach news and a story, truthful, but not necessarily neutral.
This is when I pull out my prop. I have been saying that for a while, and now I have it on my sweater.
So
See?
Explain to people, what is be truthful, not neutral,
Okay,
for people
so-
who might not understand?
Well, for me, it was born out of this current climate of attack on the freedom and the veracity of the press. It basically means you've got to tell the truth. You cannot sit and assume or tell people that in every case there's a he said, she said. That's an attempt to be neutral when often it doesn't exist. Because in certain times, let's just take the climate. Here in Tucson, all around the world, there have been massive global protests against climate change. And you know what? For a long, long time, journalists were guilty of treating this crisis as a he said, she said, thinking that objectivity was equating the unbelievable weight of scientific evidence with the teeny-weeny number of deniers who we elevated to equal partners. So that's what I mean. You can't be neutral in those cases. You have to tell the truth, because look where we are now. We're at a climate crisis, a catastrophe that has to be addressed very, very quickly.
Climate change is just one of many issues Amanpour explores on her global affairs show, Amanpour, that debuted on CNN International in 2009. PBS began airing the program in late 2017 as a replacement for Charlie Rose after he was fired amid sexual harassment allegations that came to light during the height of the Me Too movement. When the Me Too movement was gaining momentum, journalism got caught up in it, both in local newsrooms and some big names in our business got caught up into it. You just met with a group of journalism students here at the University of Arizona. What do you tell them about getting into the business and what they need to know?
Well, I think they need to know that it's on their merits and on their smarts. I think they need to know that they are guaranteed a safe working environment, and I believe the Me Too movement has made that much, much more possible. I hope that culture has ended now. And again, I would pay tribute to the journalists who made that happen. It was journalists, not the courts, not the politicians. It was journalists who blew open this Harvey Weinstein situation and created a movement, the Me Too movement.
You have been a loud voice for more women in journalism as you walk around a journalism school, be it here or any other. Are you happy with what you're seeing with women?
I am, actually. I think that, when I started, certainly as a war correspondent, there were very, very few women doing this. Very, very few. And now, almost everyone is a woman. I mean, I'm exaggerating, obviously, but now it's absolutely 50-50, if not sometimes more women than men. So I think that's really great. It's a really great development. I think women, constantly prove their mettle and prove their abilities in this regard. I would say one thing, and there aren't enough women in the executive suites. There aren't enough women in the top decision-making places, and until that changes, we're going to have to lobby for more women in the decision-making spaces too.
All right, well, thanks for sitting down with us.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Returning to the issue of climate change, amid growing demands that governments take action, some of the loudest calls are coming from younger voices. In a return to our occasional commentary series, Own Words, we heard from University of Arizona students Kyle Klein and Daniel Casanova. At 19 and 18 years old, they led this month's climate strike in Tucson. They shared why they believe this issue belongs at the forefront.
Climate change is one of the most important societal issues that we all face because the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change reported that if we do not reduce our 2010 carbon emissions by 45% in the next 10 or 11 years, give or take, we'll be facing irreparable damages for our planet by 2030. This is the moment because if we do not act by 2030, by the time that I am a 30-year-old adult, our planet will be facing irreparable damages if we don't make change.
There are several politicians in government that do not believe that this is even an issue. So if they're not going to act like the adults and the leaders that they're supposed to be, then you know what? We are.
This is an issue that every single person, regardless of party affiliation, is going to have to deal with. Each and every single one of our politicians and representatives needs to understand that this is going to exacerbate whatever issues that they run their platform on.
Whether or not climate change exists, we're past that. That should not be argued, period. Whether or not you understand climate change, that's a personal problem. Go educate yourself.
As individuals, we should be making sure that we're sourcing our clothing from sustainable suppliers, making sure that we're eating less meat because it requires a lot more resources to produce, making sure that we're driving less, biking more. All of those things that we can do as individual people, if they're done by millions, have a large-scale impact. Striking is a wonderful way to get the public involved and to make sure that legislators know our voices are there and are strong and are loud and are going to hold them accountable. But now we have to do so. Send letters to the offices of your representatives.
We saw it in the abolitionist movement. We saw it in the civil rights movement. Grassroots movements work, and this is exactly what this is. We're going to keep fighting until we see change.
That's all for now. Thanks for joining us. To get in touch, visit us on social media or send an email to arizona360@azpm.org. We'll see you next week.